So we're so glad to see all of you on this call today and to hear all of you. You're joining us via the phone. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us to talk about this project. So a few quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. You should all currently, let's say, be muted, and we ask that you remain muted during the presentations to minimize background noise for others on the call. Now, that being said, we do want it to be an interactive meeting. So if you would like to provide a comment or ask a question at any point throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask that question or provide that comment. There's a couple ways that you can do that. You can either type your question or comment into the chat box if you're joining us online. The chat is located in the top right corner of your screen. If you click on the little button that says chat, it will open it up and you can type your question or comment into the box. You can also raise your hand virtually in the online meeting platform. If you go up to the top right and see reactions, if you click on reactions and click on raise hand, you'll be able to raise your hand in the meeting and we'll know to call on you. Or if all else fails, you can also just unmute yourself and say, I have a question or I have a comment. We're happy to welcome that as well as another way to do that. So please feel free throughout the presentation if you have questions or comments. All right, we're really looking forward, as noted, to hearing all of your thoughts and perspectives on what we'll be sharing with you today. So with that, dive right in. So our agenda for today, I'm going to start with some welcome, with a welcome and introductions, right, for our team. And since we have a small group on the line, we'll also do some online attendee introductions. Then we'll walk in through a project summary. Then we'll do a meeting summary. We'll talk about what the goal for today is, what process we're going to use, and allow you to ask any questions right at that stage. Then we'll talk through our various areas, the gaps that we're talking about today, and we'll close with some follow-ups and next steps, and then end the meeting. So from a high level, that's what our order is for today. So with that, quick introductions. My name is Jennifer Warner-Heyman. I am a traffic engineer by trade, but I sort of work in the plan engineering world, right? Planner engineering world. I serve as the task manager for this project. Joining me today, we have Brian Funkhauser and Casey Bodiger, who I will let them introduce themselves. So Brian, take it away.
Yes, thanks, Jennifer, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight to talk about this project. And as Jennifer indicated, I am the contract manager, client liaison between the project team and our client, which is Travis Siegel at the Northwest Commission. They've been spearheading this event through their role as the administrative lead with the Northwest Rural Planning Organization, or the RPO. Casey?
Thank you. My name is Casey Bodiger. I'm a transportation planner with the project team, and I provide support to Jennifer and Brian, and I'll be on board tonight also providing support throughout the meeting. Back to you, Jennifer.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian and Casey. And as I noted, since we only have a handful of folks on the call today, we're also going to do guest attendee introductions as well. So I will just call on you, and if you'd like to provide a brief just introduction of who you are, just so that we know who's on the line with us today. So Bob, would you like to start?
All right, I think I am unmuted. I am Bob Jennings. I'm the president of Allegheny River Trail in Clarion County, Inc., which is up to my eyeballs in working on trying to develop the 3.2-mile gap between Foxburg and Emlenton. We have the full first mile under control. We have 40 to 50 volunteers working on various tasks, getting ready for October or November, when we find out whether DCNR will grant our application for the funding to build the entire first mile of the trail. And I am in discussions with the other landowners to try to see if I can get some or all of them, at least some, off of the fence, who've been sitting back for the last 15 years saying, oh, they'll never build this bike trail. So nobody's wanted to talk to speak of. So hopefully things are changing. That's me.
Appreciate the introduction and the additional context. Thank you for sharing, Bob. Kim Harris, would you like to go next?
Sure. I work for the Oil Region Alliance, which is economic development, tourism, and heritage. We are a National Heritage Area, Venango County, the Oil Region National Heritage Area. And we reach up into Crawford County, the southeast corner. I have been involved with the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail since its inception and has served as secretary, I think, from about 2013, somewhere in there. So I work hand in hand with Bob. And as the Oil Region Alliance, we reach outside our boundaries to help with the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail and trying to close some of the gaps. That's it in a nutshell.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for the introduction, Kim. Others on the line, I see someone, Amy Creedle. Would you like to introduce yourself? Amy, you are muted, so if you need to unmute. Amy might have stepped away for just a moment. All right, another person I see, Carter, either first name or last name. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Leah Carter. I participate on several boards or entities that are connected to trail development. The Titusville Area Trails Association, Erie to Pittsburgh Trail, Oil Regional Alliance, Council on Greenways and Trails, Northwest Commission's Transportation Advisory, you know, lots of different hats. But it all comes back to advocating for trail development. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell for me.
Great, thanks so much for joining us today, Leah. Really appreciate the introduction. All right, and then Tom, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Tom Mcclellan. I'm the Assistant District Executive for Design at PennDOT in Northwest Pennsylvania, covering the counties of Crawford, Erie, Forest, Mercer, Venango, Warren. And, you know, part of our duties is not only looking at vehicle transportation, but also ped and bike issues. And I'm just interested to hear the conversation tonight regarding, you know, the northern part of the trail, which would, you know, connect that missing link probably from the Spartansburg area down toward Titusville. So that's why I'm here. And I don't have any great suggestions for that area. We have a couple routes through there, but I'm just interested to hear what others share and think tonight. And if PennDOT can be a help in any of those issues, you know, we'll be glad to help as well too. So thank you.
Oh, and I see I muted. Great, thanks so much, Tom. Really appreciate the introduction. I believe I've got everyone who's on the line. As folks join in, we'll just allow them to sort of hop on and join us. So with that, we'll now move along to the project summary. So for those of you who are unaware, this project, as Brian noted, is being funded through the Northwest Planning Commission. And it is a study whose primary purpose is to determine the safest optimal on-road routes for bicyclists around the existing gaps along the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail. You will hear as we talk through the concepts that we're going to be presenting here today. They are primarily focusing on-road facilities. You will hear some discussion of off-road options or portions, right? That this is just part of the conversation. So the goal for this study, the results, is for the results to be used for communicating route conditions to potential trail users and cyclists, and then also allowing for trail groups, counties, municipalities, all those wonderful entities to pursue grant funding, assistance, and additional support, right, in completing those trail improvements. So we're essentially just the first step in the process. We're not doing, you know, full designs. These are just conceptual planning level ideas being shared today. So the gaps that we are looking at in this particular study is the Hidetown Borough, City of Titusville gap, Crawford County. We are also looking at the Emlenton Borough to Boxburg Borough gap, Venango and Clarion counties, and then the Allegheny River Trailhead, aka Parker, to Armstrong Trailhead in Clarion County. So those are the three areas you can see on the screen there that we are going to be talking about today and that our study is comprised of. So the meeting today, what are we actually doing? So the goals for today's meeting is simply to share our concepts, addressing these trail gaps with all of you, and then hearing your thoughts, feedback, and perspectives on the draft concepts. So that in a nutshell is what we're hoping to get out of today's conversation. The process for today's meeting that we're hoping to use is that we'll be walking through each of those 3 gap areas. And for each of those, we'll talk about some existing condition information. We'll walk through the draft concepts, and then we'll open it up for your questions and feedback. We will end the meeting, as I noted at the beginning, with information about next steps in the projects and where you can go to get more information. So with that all shared, are there any questions related to overarching project summary and the meeting summary for how we'll be running it today? Any questions?
This is Bob. I tend to ask a lot of questions.
Go for it, Bob.
Did I understand that the focus of this is to just identify on-road options to get through these different gaps?
So the original purpose of the study was to identify those on-road options. As I noted, there are some of our draft concepts that include some off-road portions or off-road options, and we will definitely get to that, but the original goal for the study was to look at on-road options. Sort of to say, okay, we're having trouble with the off-road routes, and in the meantime, are there any alternate routes on-road? So does that help answer the question?
Well, we can certainly eliminate 2 of the focus areas immediately because there is no off-road option for Emlenton to Foxburg, nor is, in my judgment, any off-road option from the Parker Bridge to Upper Hillville. Not that you could safely put human beings on a bike and go through those areas. I can't speak to Hightown.
Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that, Bob, and we'll definitely get to that when we get to those portions, I promise. But any other questions before we dig into, we'll start with Emlenton to Foxburg, but any other questions from those on the call? All right, so with that, let's dig into the meat and potatoes, what we're talking about here. All right, so Bob, you talked about for the Emlenton to Foxburg area. What area are we really talking about? We are talking about this Emlenton portion down to connect in with the trail in Foxburg. So this sort of area in here is what we're talking about. The existing conditions, what's out there now? We've got rural rolling hill, steep grade, limited road width conditions outside of the direct town areas, right? One of the on-road concepts that we've presented here is, or I should say that we looked into, was to hop up 268 and then come across and come down. We are ultimately not recommending this as a potential route due to the high speeds and the current roadway widths. It would not, as Bob noted, be a safe condition to be putting cyclists or recommending cyclists, particularly of a rail trail, let's say, variety, out there in these conditions. So that particular route we are not recommending. The only other option for an on-road facility, as Bob noted, is to go across the bridge and then come down on 268. So once again, this is another one that we are not recommending due to the high speeds and limited roadway widths. So as you noted, Bob, both of those options are not good options. So for the Emlenton to Foxburg connection in this gap area, we are actually recommending that you pursue an off-road option. So as noted, yes, the study is looking at on-road, but it's sort of in the realm of also keeping in mind what's going to be best for that gap area. So with that being shared, I welcome your comments and questions around what we've shared with you today.
I live on Route 268. halfway between Emlenton to Foxburg, and I drive it every day in both directions. I get my mail in Foxburg, which is 1.2 miles away. The supermarket we buy our food in is in Emlenton, about 1.5 miles to the north. Route 268 is a major thoroughfare for tractor trailer, tanker trucks, tractor trailer trucks from Petrolia up to the top of the hill to get on Interstate 80 going east or west. It's the principal route because large trucks are not permitted to take Route 58 up to Interstate 80. So the exit 42 is the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth option for any trucks going to Petrolia or leaving Petrolia to go elsewhere in the country to the north, east, or west. The posted speed limit is for the most part 55, but people drive 65, 70 miles an hour, including the trucks. And there have been some few people killed on the road. The hillside on the west side of the Allegheny River is very steep in most of that 3 miles or so on Route 268. And there's no shoulder. There's no shoulder. I can't even easily walk on the shoulder to pick up garbage, cans and bottles and stuff, unless I do it on a portion of Sunday when there's very few trucks, because of the very steep hillside. When the trucks are racing by at 60 miles an hour plus, they'll suck you right onto the road because of the turbulence with the hillside so close. On the east side of Route 268, again, there's no shoulder of consequence. There might be 2 feet before you're up against the guardrail, but not much more. And on the other side of the guardrail, it drops down very steeply to the river or to houses that sort of hug the edge of the river. So there's no possibility of building a bench or extending the roadway on the east side. So you can't create a bike route on the west without carving a lot into the hillside, which you're not going to do because it's already a steep slope. And you can't do anything on the east side because it falls down to the river, or you've got houses down there with very small yards. So I think anybody that would suggest Route 268 is a viable option for safe travel on a bicycle is it's just not going to fly. I didn't hear what you said the other on-road route was between Foxburg and Emlenton. Were you talking about going up 38 and then going across Metz Road and then down to 58 again and then back down to Foxburg? Those are the very steep hills, and the road is in a fairly lousy state. The Richland Township that it passes through has no tax base whatsoever. There's no roadways, therefore there's no fuel money. And the people that I know that live up there are constantly begging for the township to fill in some of the deep potholes and put a little more paving or gravel in there so they can at least get their cars through without flipping them. So, the fundamental problem with that route is the fundamental problem with rural roads in this whole area, that there's not a tax base or source of funding to keep them in a good enough shape that it would be safe for cars, let alone for bikes.
So this is Kim Harris. So Bob, I think what Jennifer had indicated was that they're not recommending any road facilities for that gap between Emlenton and Foxburg, which we knew, but having them look at this gives you another document that engineers have looked at these that you can use as you're going for grant monies by citing this particular study that they actually looked to find, was there a temporary route that could be used by cyclists until that gap was closed? And the answer is no, there is not a safe route. We kind of knew that, but it gives you more strength as another document to say, here it is. This is a fresh one. They looked at it again. So I'm pretty sure that's what Jennifer was indicating, is there was no recommendation of any road route that is safe.
Well,
for that gap.
if there's a link to that study, it would be nice if it could be shared with people like me who are trying to build the bike trail, because I haven't seen the link. And I know there've been engineers talking about using Route 268, because I wrote a detailed letter to the engineers
Bob,
in Indiana.
Yeah,
they're
this is the
actually
study.
doing the study right now, and you will get a link to it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, really appreciate you sharing those perspectives though, Bob, because it totally agree. Having been out there, would not recommend on-road facilities on either of those, particularly for the trail user group that we're talking about, right? We're not talking the adventure cyclists who are out there traveling the country all times. We're talking about rail trail users who are on off-road portions, particularly for the rest of the connections. So yeah, once this study is documented and the report is finalized, we will absolutely be sharing that with them. Give you a little more ammunition there, Bob, for your case. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns related to the Emlenton to Foxburg portion, what we've been talking about so far today? All right, so the next portion that we are going to be talking through is the Parker to Armstrong Trailhead. So the Allegheny River Trailhead to the Armstrong Trail. What we will be presenting are the potential on and off-road concepts. So the first one is the on-road concept that we'll be presenting, which follows Perryville Road up to Williger Road, then to Dockwalker Road, Monterey, and to Hillville. On the screen here, this is just at the parking for the Allegheny River Trailhead, and then some images of the roadways along that portion of what we're calling the on-road concept. The plan for this type of on-road routing would be to post share the road signs. The roadways are relatively low traffic volumes, and the speeds are within a realm to accommodate that type of bicycle facility of a share the road facility. The other concept that we are presenting today as, let's say, a future concept, which includes some on-road and off-road portions, follows along Riverview Drive to Monterey Road to Hillville Road. There's a portion where Riverview Drive sort of trails off and you have sort of a private property, old railroad bed scenario through here, and then it would connect on to Monterey Road and Hillville. Hence the on and off-road concept. This particular concept would require the updating the time and money to either purchase properties or negotiate trail access through private properties, and the time to then develop or clean up or work through the development of the trail in those portions that are not currently on roads, right? We're looking at comparing these two options of the on-road concept and the off-road concept. The on-road, right, has rural scenery, you've got lots of sun exposure, you have steep hills, relatively low traffic volumes. This one's a little more readily implementable, right, relatively low cost. We're just talking about signage. For the on/off-road future concept, this is more riverfront scenery. You've got this sort of shady tree cover, right? Relatively flat terrain and even lower traffic volumes because there's just some residential properties along that area, right? The real, let's say, con for this one is the time and money needed to update that property and to work through the access issues. So with that being presented here today, are there any questions, comments, concerns that you would like to share? Additional perspectives? We're here to hear from all of you. So any thoughts on those two concepts?
Well, this is Bob again. Because we're trying to close gaps in Clarion County, we've taken a fairly hard look at this 5 to 6 mile gap. And we even solicited a planning study from Mackin to take a hard look of alternatives and how to bypass some of the most difficult landowners when you get down to West Monterey. Quite a few years ago, I tried to drive the on-road sections to get a real sense of how many of them were, how much of it was level, more or less level with shoulders, and how much of it was difficult in that, again, it's a rural road situation, even though it's not heavily used. Some of these paths, and I don't know the ones that you've outlined well enough to speak to them specifically, but a number of the paths are fairly narrow roads. They're very crowned, so you have a flat area in the center of the lane and a half, 2 lanes, and then it drops off very steeply on either side to ditches to drain water away. I don't think it would be safe for a family with kids. I think, a seasoned biker wearing, riding on mountain bike tires could do it. But what are you going to do when somebody with a pickup truck comes hauling over a crest at the speed limit or much more to the speed limit, fishtailing as it negotiates corners? I personally, as a head of a trail group, wouldn't recommend anybody going on those particular roads. If it's a level road like some of the things that you're showing here, which I don't know where they are, that's that might be fine for those segments, but I don't think you can get from the Parker Bridge down to Upper Hillville continuously on those kinds of roads. I don't believe it. You'd have to show me a YouTube GoPro of somebody on a bicycle riding that. That's what I'd like to see, to show that, oh yeah, there's a piece of cake.
It's definitely hilly terrain. I will admit that, right? There are definite hills in this area. We definitely noted that as one of the, let's say, drawbacks to this particular on-road option. If you think about from the road user safety perspective, yes, we need to take into consideration the sight distance, right, over particular hills, and it's likely that in those areas is where you would in particular put some warning signs, right, if this were to be an option. But I agree, Bob, that this one is not probably as preferred or as comfortable for family type users. Thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. Other thoughts?
There's one other important factor for that large stretch. West Monterey straddles the old railroad right-of-way, and there are a very large number of small lots. It's not a situation where you've got 10 or 15 or 20 landowners that you have to deal with. When you start thinking about negotiating easements to do the bike trail, there's over 125 to 150 landowners on either side of that corridor from the Parker Bridge to Upper Hillville. Some are very pro-bike trail, and we have allies down there. It's going to take money, time, heavy lifting to negotiate enough easement agreements that people see that it really is a benefit to develop the bike trail. And then once that engine really gets rolling, there's some people that have built their houses right up against or on top of the railroad corridor. So you're going to have to bypass that. And there is enough land that you can certainly bypass it, but it's that's going to be money and cost. So, of course, I'm trying to get rails to trails on a trail corridor where there's no vehicles. I think it's feasible, but it's going to take a lot of work, years of effort. And we're a small little group. We can't do it all by ourselves. We've been reaching out and saying, hey, anybody else that wants to come in here and help fund getting this thing done, studying and looking at how to bypass the people who are obstreperous, hey, come on in. Whether it's Chris Ziegler or Peck or ORA or the Franklin-based group who supposedly owns the corridor, but doesn't have the resources to work on developing it. We all want to see the Brady Tunnel done, and we all want to see all these bikers with their money coming up from Pittsburgh and Washington and every place in between, because I live in Foxburg, and the businesses there are dying to get access to all those bikers. But they're not going to get access till this 5 to 6 mile gap is straightened out, even if you do finish the Brady Tunnel. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate you sharing those additional perspectives. Any other questions, comments, concerns related to the 2 concepts that we've shared here today for the Parker to Armstrong Trailhead portion? We welcome thoughts, perspectives, right? Ideas, comments. Like that, we'll move right along to the next portion. The final gap that we are looking at is the Hydetown to Titusville gap. So this, once again, looking at the Titusville to Hydetown area, specifically connecting the trail, next in here. And as noted, we were tasked with looking primarily at on-road options to connect those trails, but you'll see we are going to be presenting 2 overarching routes today. So the route that is shown in pink is in the back, and then we've got the light blue route that is on top. The pink route is in primarily on-road route. In this area, it's pretty direct. What the most direct connection is, runs along SR8 between Titusville and Hydetown. We'll go into the specifics of what that's going to look like in a second, but before I do, the second overarching route that we're presenting is a combination of off-road and then on-road facility. So with that, and then apologies, in addition to that, there's also, you can see this green dashed line. This is presenting a variation of the on-road, and I will definitely get to that when we talk through it. So with that, now I'm going to walk you through some of the different options that we're talking about for those 2 overarching routes. So for the on-road route, it would essentially connect in up Martin Street in Titusville, then would travel along Main Street. And for both of those portions, they would be in a share-o or shared road situation. So bicyclists would be able to travel either in the lane or on the shoulder right in those areas. Then as it would transition to SR8 here, for this portion between Main Street tees in up to the Walmart, it would be a shoulder bike lane facility situation. At that stage, after the Walmart, it would then transition into we're calling a buffered bike lane, essentially a bike lane on the side of the roadway with some space, a painted buffer between the vehicle lane and bicycle lane, and then transitioning, traveling along up until you get to Hydetown, at which point you would hop onto main road through Hydetown, and it would be a shared road facility through there. This is the first on-road concept. You can see there's some graphics on the left here of what those shoulder bike lanes would look like. There's a graphic on the right, on the right here for the buffered bike lane as well. I'll show some larger graphics in just a second. So for the buffered bike lane, which I am guessing is the one that you are the most interested in seeing what that cross section would look like, the section of SR8 past the Walmart has a really wide width, nearing upwards of 40 feet, which is a lot of room to play with if we think about what's available as far as width-wise on the pavement. So if we were to take those travel lanes, narrow them down to 11 feet, then you could provide a 2-foot painted buffer and a 5-foot bike lane on either side of the roadway for that portion. Another option that we are planning to include is same on-road option for everything except for that Walmart up to Hyde-Town portion. So one option is to do that buffered bike lane. Another is to do what we're calling a 2-way separated bike lane. Now this one is a little more, let's say, non-traditional. So in this type of scenario, you would be shuffling the vehicle lanes over to the northeast side of the roadway, right? You would be reducing those lanes to 11 feet. You'd still provide a 4-foot shoulder, and then you'd have a 4-foot painted buffer to separate a 2-way bicycle facility that would be 10 feet wide. So this is another option that would provide additional separation for cyclists. Instead of having to cross on either side, they would be remaining on the western side, southwestern side of the roadway. All right, so those are the two on-road concepts. I'll present the other two and then we'll talk about them. I'm sure there's lots of comments and thoughts that are going to be shared in this portion. So as I shared, there's the overarching on-road concept. I just showed two variations of that. We're calling them 1A, 1B, right? Two variations. Now I'm going to talk through the combination on-road, off-road option and the two variations of that. So for this combo on-road, off-road concept, it would essentially travel along the rail line and the abandoned rail line as well, and have sort of a gravel trail facility. So this would be an off-road portion. Then behind the Walmart, you would connect in on a driveway type, very low volume roadway back there, and it would be a shared road facility up to SR8. And then you'd continue along similar to other concepts we presented in either a buffered bike lane or 2-way separated bike lane facility option. So I've got the 4 concepts shown on the screen here. I am anticipating there will be some questions and comments with what we've presented so far. Thoughts from the group? Questions, comments?
So this is Kim. Main Street, you mentioned Main Street, taking it up Main Street, and that's, I think, what Titusville redevelopment has it marked right now. Is there any recommendation in regards to parking? Because right now there is parking on both sides of that street, which kind of narrows it, and then you get traffic from all the schools and such, or events that are occurring, and that kind of narrows it even more.
So for the type of bicycle facility that we're recommending, because of the lower speeds through town, it's a shared road facility. So the bicyclists are, you put the painted marking and the share the road signage, right? And they can be in the lane with vehicles if they're interested, or off to the side. Now, obviously with parking, it does get a little tight, and passing is less easy, we'll put it that way. Another option, if Main Street is, let's say, less desirable because of that parking, because of the traffic volumes on that roadway, there are many parallel routes within the town of Titusville. So, for example, we've got that dashed green line. Spruce Street is lower volume, wider widths, more comfortable, maybe a less stressful cycling experience than on Main Street. Does that answer your question, Kim?
It does. I definitely personally have concerns with Main Street. I wouldn't ride on Main Street because of the parking on the both sides and the traffic that goes up there. I probably would prefer to go to one of the other streets, Spruce, if that's Spruce. There's not as much traffic, and I believe Spruce probably has more stop signs, I think, which calms the traffic some. So, yeah, so I'm sure Leah might have some comments. Maybe.
Well, in Titusville, it is continual complaining about people speeding on Main Street because there are very few stop signs. And then you have the school, you have Main Street School, you have the YMCA is also on the one end of Main Street, and then you definitely would never want to ride a bicycle down Main Street when school is starting or ending, because between the buses and the parents dropping kids off and the kids walking, there is no way that you would want to ride a bicycle there. You would really not want to ride a bicycle on Main Street because, like I said, it's kind of a straight route with no stop signs, and everybody's always complaining about speeding on that road. So the low speeds in town, that's a fallacy. That's not what happens on Main Street. My other concern is no matter where you paint the lanes on Route 8, what are you going to do about all the tractor trailers? Because I know I would never let my children or grandchildren ride a bicycle on Route 8. There is no way. You've got businesses, you've got turning traffic, you've got crossing of business commercial driveways. I mean, that section you're showing right here, you've got the car dealership that's got about 6 driveways on the left. And you've got the tire and auto place on the right, which is actually the location for our open air market in the, from June through October. And that's got 2 driveways. And that is a very, very busy intersection. That whole section right there is so busy. I would never let anybody, especially not a child on a bike, ride a bike on that road. So
this is Kim, just to pipe in a little bit. We all agree off-road is the best option. We do know that these are gaps that have serious problems. So if they could be improved, could they be an interim type route for people to use that are trying to ride the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail? I think that's what we're looking at. I agree. Some of them still are not going to be appropriate for children, unless your child listens really, really well, but there still could always be accidents on them. When you look at the one you have right up there right now, Jennifer, that kind of gives me a little better feeling because, like, I think we talked before, I could actually, if I was heading north, I could actually go in the southern bound lane of that bike trail and still be further away from traffic. That to me is probably, though, a longer period of time. If we knew there was no way we were going to get off Route 8 for an extended period of time for an off-road trail, that would be my preference. But if we knew it was coming, which is not the case right now, within 5 to 10 years, to me, that might be a lot of expense that we would go through, even though it looks like it might be the safest on that route. If that makes sense to anybody.
Kim, I agree with you. I think that this version with the both lanes on the one side is the better of the 2 options.
Yeah.
The other thing that, even though this would be a temporary fix, that you're going to run into is the landowner issue. Even though you're not on their land, you're going to hear it from Hasbrook's. They're not going to want it on the road in front of their property. I can guarantee it. And then the option, the one that went out the old rail bed out to Walmart, you're never going to get, well, I shouldn't say that. It's going to be tough to get Terry Rio to agree to that. That's going to take a lot of work. I mean, I would put in that work if that was going to be a permanent route, but if you're trying to do this as a temporary route, I'm not sure that's.
Is that from 27? Jennifer, is that from 27 North, or is that, where does that begin? Because she's right, if it goes through Terry Rio's property, I can't see that close.
So let me zoom into it on the map here so you can see what we're talking about. So it would be running along the old railroad line and then moving up here to Skyline Drive. So it would travel
from
behind the Walmart.
Okay.
Over. There's
From Perry Street Station.
And then down it.
Yeah, that part of that's going to be an issue. From Route 27, there's a railroad crossing there. Heading up the rail corridor might be easier. I'm on a laptop too, so it's making it even a little bit worse.
Right now, Terry is got a lot of trucking and a lot of pipe and pipe storage going on right behind the mill venue, right behind Perry Street Station, where the abandoned rail bed was. And part of the abandoned rail bed got bulldozed out by Skyline Drive. That got bulldozed by Hasbrook. So that's not even there anymore. So yeah, there's going to be some issues.
From 27, I think we might be able to get the railroad, which is up there, right there. Yep, right there, about 27 North. We may be able to get along the railroad there. That was a possibility at one time. But like Leah was saying, through the area where all the pipe and everything's stored, that's probably.
Yeah.
I mean, that would surprise me if that happened. But the 27 from 27 to Walmart is a possibility.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's other ways to get folks over there, right? If that
he doesn't.
really would not be.
Oh, you mean Charter Plastics? Yeah. Well, who owns it?
Sounds like Leah's getting confirmation.
I'm getting an update. And it could be actually good. I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm going to have to try to investigate. But my source is telling me that
I'm your source.
Terry Rio sold Charter Plastics to another entity. Now, if we're talking about dealing with a whole new person or entity, that could be good and it could be bad. So they're from Germany, apparently, he's saying. But, you know, my husband has brown eyes, so he could be full of shit. So I don't know if there's truth to this. So, no, I will have to check it out and see if that might make things a little easier to work with.
Appreciate you sharing that, Leah, and thank you, Kim, for the update as well. Any other thoughts, questions?
Jennifer,
related to concepts, go for it, Ron.
Yes. At the intersections where you have both trails, northbound and southbound traffic going together, whenever you get to the intersections, is there special things that you have to do at the intersections? Because someone taking a right-hand turn off a southbound on an automobile may not think about looking for someone coming from the north, even though they may have just passed them. And I guess the other thing with intersections, a lot of these intersections aren't at right angles. So a lot of them come to be just odd angles that come onto Route 8.
It's a great question, Ron. So totally agree. For the major intersections and probably even the driveways, particularly for this scenario where it's, let's say, an unexpected alignment, right? We would definitely want to implement some design pieces that would help with that. So I've actually done a little research in grad school. I was on what's called a right hook crash, where a vehicle is turning and the bicyclist is continuing straight, right, turning right, and then the bicyclist continues through. In these types of scenarios, it's helpful to have signage to help draw the driver's eye to say yield to bikes as you're turning. So on major intersections, that would likely be a recommended option, right? There are some other, let's say, design and engineering countermeasures you can implement to help with that. Reducing the what's called turning radius, right, to slow vehicles down so that it reduces the severity if a crash occurs, right? Obviously, you want to prevent crashes, but then also implementing those other safe system approaches, right? Yes, intersections would absolutely need to be considered and thoughtfully designed in this type of scenario. It's a great question.
Jennifer, I have a real worry.
Okay.
This whole issue in Titusville with going up Route 8, not going up Route 8, that kind of thing. This has been a bone of contention for, gosh, probably a decade. And I'm just really nervous that if we do a temporary route up Route 8, that we're never going to get an off-road trail.
Appreciate you sharing that, Leah. And it's something we can note in the report that there may be concerns, right, about public perception of investing money into a temporary option if the long-term goal is not that. What are others' thoughts who are on the line for that comment?
Well, my comment may be a little odd, but sometimes I think you have to look at also, we'll look at how much this is going to cost, and maybe a little bit more you get the permanent instead of going temporary. So, it may not be the best conversation, but it does enter the conversation of what do we really want for permanent, and is it worth doing temporary? But you have to go through and look at what are your options to be able to define what the temporaries are, and sometimes point out how bad the temporaries are, and that can help you get your permanent solution.
It's a great point, Ron.
Yeah, it is.
Part of this conversation, something that we're absolutely hoping to include, right, are the comments and this type of feedback that we received during the public outreach process, because like Ron's saying, it informs that, yes, we have these 4 options, but if it's not ultimately garnering lots of support, that's important to note, right? So that the money can be put in the most useful place. Appreciate that. Other comments, questions, concerns related to this location?
How does PennDOT view putting bike lanes on routes that are heavily truck trafficked? Do they have an opinion about that, or how do they feel about that?
Now we've got Tom Mcclellan on the call, but I also don't want to put Tom on the spot. If you'd like for me to respond.
That's okay.
Okay.
Tom's used to me doing that to him, I think. So
No, not a problem. But no. I mean, obviously we want to look for the best solution, and it's just I don't have a great answer for you, Leah, and the group here. That's why it's been such an issue. There isn't a great spot from Hydetown to Titusville. I mean, Route 8 but you know, in Oil City, you know, the bike route is on the road. We use Sharrows, you know, throughout Oil City, which I'm sure Leah and Kim are aware of. And you know, as far as accident history, I don't think we've, you know, there's nothing coming to my mind recently of any bicycle accidents through there. I mean, yes, and I do see traffic through there, just being a resident here in town. I don't see the kids and families riding. You know, these are more of the hardcore cyclists, or you know, their helmet matches their gear and their bike and everything. Those are the people I see that use a lot of the bike routes through Oil City. But you know, it's, you know, we put up the Sharrows, we put up the share the road signs. You know, we do have the wide shoulders there on Route 8 as was suggested there. You know, one of the concerns I had about behind Walmart is I think that's where the trucks deliver. You know, that road to the north of Walmart, that's where the truck deliveries come in Titusville. So that'd be something I'd make sure of. You know, whatever routes get decided here, I think that's something to bring to the table. Speed limit, you know, it is 35, 25, except once you get out past that Walmart, I think it goes to 45 to Hightown. So yeah, the further we can get the cyclists off of the road is probably, you know, the safest. But you know, I don't see families using that, but you know, we're just trying to make a connection, it seems like, with a study and offer some things. So those are some of the things that are in my head, like thinking about all the bike routes, and because we have bicycle routes A, Y, Z, X up in our region. Yeah. You know, those are places where we just have the cyclists ride on the 5-foot shoulder, and that's all that's really required. We sign it every 3 to 5 miles and turns. But you know, probably didn't answer your question completely, but you know, I think it's, you know, safety is definitely a concern anywhere, but you know, we can sign it appropriately and follow all of the guidance. You know, there's, you know, the AASHTO bike manual is kind of what we follow and we've adopted at PennDOT. So, you know, those are the things we'd be looking at. The crossings at the intersection that somebody brought up, that's important. How they're signed, you know, how they're marked, whether, you know, what kind of crossing you have there too, if they have to cross. So all those things, you know, seeing a final and full plan and up for consideration, you know, our safety group would look at it and our traffic group. So.
Will this study also put dollar signs next to these different options?
That's a great question, Leah. We're in the process of finalizing our planning level cost estimates for these, but yes, we are planning to include some high level planning level cost estimates associated with these to provide you with sort of a scale of cost estimate for these types of options.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
This is Bob, and this is not a first-hand comment. This is a second-hand comment, and I think it's a safety issue. I have a good friend who bikes all over the country and has gone back and forth from coast to coast a couple of times, and spent some time with me a couple of years ago. And he doesn't blink traveling over a road like this Route 8. And it doesn't bother him that there's trucks and there's a lot of traffic as long as they obey the rules. But was a real plague for him, and he felt that Eastern Ohio and Western Pennsylvania was perhaps among the worst areas that he traveled on the entire continent, was the fact that PennDOT doesn't have the money, I guess, to sweep the shoulders. And so he was constantly blowing tires because of little bits of glass and metal and other debris that would be on the shoulders that he was forced to bike on. And I don't know whether that's a real factor in this area. And maybe it's what he was talking about was unique to getting from Ohio into Pittsburgh. But he certainly complained that was about the biggest problem that he had to deal with biking all over the country, with the exception of dogs chasing him when he was out in farmlands. But I just raised that because I don't know whether that's in the mix of discussion or factors that are taken into consideration. I've never seen anybody sweeping Route T68 or any of the other major highways around here.
It's a great question, Bob, because particularly for the two-way separated bike lane option, maintenance is going to have to be a part of the conversation. Whether there's a maintenance agreement, right, between the city or the boroughs or the areas, or negotiations with PennDOT, right, around the maintenance for that type of facility for this sweeping. I'll be honest, I don't know off the top of my head what the maintenance standards
I
are.
can tell you, I
Yeah.
can tell you from PennDOT, we sweep the roads at the end of winter, get the salt and the skid off the roads. But as the year goes on, there's probably not much paid attention to. But
That's Tom
you
Mcclellan.
bring up a great point. Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I think I could check with my county here, at least West Pennsylvania, and see if they do any other maintenance on those bike routes I mentioned, like A, Y, Z, to see if they get any additional shoulder sweepings compared to other roads in our area. So that's a good point, and something I'll bring back to our PennDOT staff. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the comment.
Tom, for A, Y, and Z, for those types of routes, do you guys have any kinds of, I mean, those are usually your road bikers. They're not your families that are riding the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail. Do you have any kind of like counts of or estimates on what kind of volume you see on those routes? Or I don't know who would even be
I'd have
counting
to
them.
look into some statistics. I would hope there's something somewhere of how many people use those facilities, but I don't have that. I know at one time I think they did put up some counters, one of the bike studies, and we just went through a big bike study here in Northwest Pennsylvania too. Within the last year or two, was conducted that talked about people's needs and wants, and it happened, I think, early during 2020, 2019 timeframe. So that's something we can look into too. It might have some counts in there.
Yeah, and I just shared a link in the chat to those who are joining online for that District 1 bicycle study. Yeah, there's a lot of really great content in there. Leah, if you're interested.
Oh, thank you very much.
Great resource to check out. Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, concerns for this Hidetown to Titusville, or additional comments? Leah, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment?
No, I just clicked on your link though, and it's asking me to sign into ArcGIS, which I obviously can't do.
If you scroll down, the very first one has, I think the first graphic has the lower one. Yeah.
I see. I can access it without going there. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
no, I'm nervous about this because, like I said, who will this get pitched to? I mean, like, our city administration owns our bike trails. Will it get pitched to them, or?
It's a great question. So right now it's just a study for the Northwest Planning Commission. So essentially where this is going to go is it will get documented in a report. And actually this is a wonderful transition. Thank you for that, Leah, into sort of the next steps conversation, right? So where this is going to go, the ultimate concepts are going to get finalized, right? As I talked about, high level planning estimates, we'll put together some action items of what would be needed to move some of those forward, right? The concepts. There'll be a finalized report. We'll come back, present it back to the public, and then it gets presented to the Northwest RPO. Where it goes from there is up to the local regional folks, right? On who you'd like to then take it to from that point. Does that answer the question, Leah?
Yes, it does. But I see you're going to present to the RPO when I'm on vacation. So make it virtual. Maybe I can dial in if I'm not too sunburned. I'll be at the beach.
What we'll do is, I believe it is a virtual meeting, so.
I think it is, Jennifer.
Yeah,
what we-
Travis has been having virtual components.
What we can do is, we are going to be posting, and at the very least, this meeting recording and slides to the website. As well, we can post the meeting information about the Northwest RPO meeting, share that along, right? And put it on the website, the project website, so that it's accessible for folks. I'm happy to do that. All right.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah, so with that, final things we'll say, as I said, we're going to post the meeting recording from today and any slides that we've shared with you here today to the website. We are going to be providing an option. So if you have anyone else in your organizations who was like, oh, I really wanted to participate in that meeting and provide feedback, but I wasn't able to attend in person, we will be providing a way for them to submit comments online through Monday, June 6th. So, yeah, half a week here to be able to do that. So if you have anyone in your organization, please feel free to share that along so that the word can get out there that there is another way to provide comments. With that, that sort of closes up our regularly scheduled events for this meeting here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the discussion, really appreciate the perspectives you brought. We will absolutely be taking them in and building them into the recommendations. So thank you so much. And with that, everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. I hope the thunderstorms treat you all well up there in the Northwest.
Thank you.
Have a great night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yep,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.